I just talked about the interest rate and why the Fed is lying to you when they say, we just don't think it's time to raise interest rates. They're never going to raise interest rates. They can't raise interest rates.
Not to those levels. I mean, they'll probably raise them, right? I mean, they're just not going to raise them to 18%.
Which is the only way to stop inflation.
Right.
I mean, this kind of inflation that is coming. But the other shoe to drop is the forbearance shoe. And I know it sounds super sexy, but actually it's really important. And once you get past the fancy terms, you realize, holy cow, what? Let me explain this in a way Stu will understand. You know when you're all hot and bothered and your wife says, not now.
Yes, I do know that.
Okay, good. That's forbearance. Okay. All right. She's just saying, not now.
Mm-hmm. But that, does that mean not ever? I never have to pay? Is that
No. Okay, so forbearance. Forbearance is the idea that you don't have to pay things right now. And that's when the first COVID bill came in and said you don't have to pay this. It was the first CARES Act. It passed overwhelmingly with Congress. It was signed into law by Donald Trump, and it allowed the federal agencies to extend forbearance to homeowners. Now, when you heard if you were impacted by COVID-19. And the Federal Reserve Bank and the government lending programs and Uncle Sam said, you don't have to worry about that. Nobody's going to be evicted. What did you think that meant?
I mean, it seemed like it was a temporary thing, I guess.
Right. So you had extra money that month,
you
right?
You have extra money, so you can. I mean, you can't be thrown out of the streets. There's a pandemic going on.
Correct,
right?
correct.
So
what happens to the money that you didn't pay for 12 to 18 months?
What happens to it? I mean,
is it just called off? Remember the definition of forbearance, Stu and Lisa?
Just not right now.
Not now.
So you have to come back and pay all that back rent?
You have to pay. Now, listen. Is
that true? Jeez.
Yes, that's true.
There's no one's going to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, Bank of America estimated that through March of 2022, 22% of its loan portfolio had gone through some form of loan modification or forbearance. So 22% of Bank of America, that number is a lot higher. Here's the thing. The federal court just said government didn't have a right to do that. You can't do that. So now they've called off forbearance. Okay? I want you to understand what all of this means. In the original CARES Act, the government, via funding lending programs through the government, the Federal Reserve Bank took on 70% of all U.S. mortgages, including nearly 90% of new mortgages to low-income areas of the country since 2009. So 70% of the mortgages are experiencing some sort of forbearance, depending on the type of lending program you use to fund the mortgages. And the United States government is now on the hook for it. So if you can't pay your debt, that's going to be a problem. I mean, if you really look at this and you look at the worst case scenario, this is how you don't own anything, and you'll like it, because the government will now own your house. The Federal Reserve will now own your house. The bank will now own your house. Let me explain. Forbearance, in short, you're eligible to stop making monthly payments during the forbearance period. In the case of the government's backed mortgages during COVID, that meant you could miss 18 to 24 months worth of mortgage payments. But what you have to understand is, and this seems like not so bad, every payment missed is added to the end of the loan. So if you miss 12 payments, a 30-year mortgage becomes a 31-year mortgage. But you're also having to pay the interest. So a 31-year mortgage, because of the interest, is probably going to be a 32-year mortgage. Sounds still okay, right? Not so much. Not so much. Forbearance isn't a free pass to live anywhere you want without mortgage or without consequence. Here is the consequence, and it's not the 31 or 32-year mortgage. If you try to sell your home, any missed payment during the forbearance period has to be made whole before the title will be released. So if you missed 18 payments of $1,800 each, you'll have to come up with $32,000 in cash to pay the forbearance to be able to sell your home. Because you owe that. Oh, here's the other thing. Because you're in arrears, it doesn't say on anybody's credit application, oh, it's forbearance. It says you are delinquent with 18 months of loans. Do you know what that's going to do to the average credit score? Banks are already going to be hesitant to lend anybody loans in the future because of this crunch that is coming. You have to have great credit. If you've been participating in forbearance, you are going to have delinquencies on your credit score, which will cost your credit card. It will go up in interest. And if you can get a loan, you're going to be paying a higher interest rate because you've been delinquent. Even if you sell your house and pay it off right now, it will still be marked delinquent. So it's a good thing I'm renting, right? Oh, yeah, not so much. Here's the mistake that millions of renters made, millions of times over. You're not forced to pay rent, and landlords aren't allowed to charge late fees. Rent continues to accrue during the months you missed. Okay, no big deal. I'm going to live the high life. Well, now that the federal court has ruled the CDC has no power to issue any kind of eviction moratoriums, renters are due for a rude awakening. If you started missing rental payments in, say, June of last year, as the moratorium is lifted, millions of renters may find out that they have to start making payments again. But they also have to make up for the money they missed. When the dust settles for COVID-19, renters who end up evicted will find their long-term credit negatively impact. They won't be able to fill out a financial form for the next apartment they're trying to rent because they owe all of this money and they didn't pay their last bills on time all during COVID. Now it's going to take a very understanding apartment complex or a very understanding bank, and they have such a heart, to say, oh, it was COVID, not a big deal. As America begins to reopen, as vaccines are administered, as America's shuttered businesses get permission to have patrons again, let's take stock and remember that once the virus is gone, the impact, the pandemic, the economic, the social, spiritual impact that this has remains. Just unpacking the U.S. mortgage and rental industries could take years and still cost homeowners, renters, landlords billions in cost. Both those you hear about on CNN, but also the costs of higher interest rates due to lower credit scores, having to choose to live in a less safe neighborhood with a longer commute because your rental history shows eviction. There are consequences to everything the government does. When they say free money, it's never free, as millions of Americans will begin to understand as America opens back up for business.